Today I'm going to paint this picture in the style of Camille Pissarro. Hi everybody, Steve Elliott here again. Today I'm painting in the style of Camille Pissarro. Now, Camille was born in 1830 and died in 1903, so he lived to a ripe old age of 73 years. He was a Danish-French painter and an impressionist and Neo-Impressionist. So, doing some research into Camille Pissarro before I started this painting, I was struck by how many different styles he painted in, and I'm sure that people that watch this video may recognise it. The actual, not my painting, but the source painting I'm used as Camille Pissarro, and others might not recognise it at all because he was very diverse in his style of painting. So he started off, at 21, he went to live in Venezuela as a painter. Before that, he'd had to work for his father as a clerk, and he spent all his spare time drawing and so on. And then a painter friend convinced him to go full time when he was 21, and he moved from the island of St. Thomas in the Virgin Isles. He moved to Venezuela, where he was a painter for 4 years, and then he moved to Paris. And in Paris, the only place you could really get yourself known would be in the Paris Salon, and you had to paint in a very prescribed style. So his early work is very conventional and very much typical of the art which was accepted during that time or period he was painting for the Salon. But he very quickly became disillusioned with the restrictions of that, and helped form the Impressionist movement. And he was actually the only painter that exhibited in all 8 Impressionist exhibitions between 1874 and 1886. Now that surprised me, because that means that the Impressionist period only lasted 12 years. When you think about how much work and on what an impact Impressionism has had on the art world, that as a movement, it only was around for 12 years. And Camille Pissarro was considered to be, he was actually labelled the Dean of the Impressionists, because he was the oldest member of the Impressionists. He was in his 50s, and he was considered to have wisdom and a balanced, kind, warm-hearted personality. And I think that's reflected in his paintings, in the subject that he uses. He does lots of sort of country scenes, very tranquil, with farm workers picking up apples and things like that. And they do look very, very, shall I say chilled out? I don't know if that's the right word. Anyway, getting back to the point that I wanted to make like 3 minutes ago, was that his initial work is very, very traditional. And then he moves into the Impressionist period, and he has all these paintings that are clearly Impressionist and easily recognisable as that. But then he moves into the Neo-Impressionist movement, which Neo-Impressionism where Impressionism was all about painting light and capturing the moment. Neo-Impressionism was much more scientific, and they used, like, the idea of using colour on the science of colour to juxtapose one colour next to another to make you sort of mix the colours in your mind. So it was And then one of this branches of the movement would be Pointillism, which probably everybody's aware of. So it's much more scientific than the Impressionist movement. And his paintings, I would imagine a lot of people would see that period of his painting as what they recognise as Camille Pissarro, where others might feel that the Impressionist paintings are. And I think the painting I've picked is almost a combination of the two, because it's certainly not Pointillism, but I can see there's a lot going off of the sort of the colour, where he uses colour against colour to mix it. And if you look in the sort of shadows, you've almost got a vermilion green and then sort of a purple colour next to that. So I kind of tried. I think, well, I'm not going to tell you what I think, actually. I'll let you decide if you think that I've made a reasonable job of this or not. Again, I enjoyed painting it. It was very, very different to the last piece I did, which was the Gustav Klimt. Different to everything I've painted before. So every time I'm trying a different style, it really does set me a challenge, because I have to rethink what I'm doing all the time. I did do I usually do the research on the artist after I've painted the picture, and I think really I should probably do it before, because that gives you a bit of an insight, a little bit more into how they paint. And what I discovered when I was doing my research was he discussed his method of painting, and he was advising somebody how to paint. And he said, and I'm quoting this, "Work at the same time on the sky, water, branches and the ground, keeping everything going on an equal basis, and increasingly rework until you have got it. Paint generously and unhesitatingly, for it is best not to lose the first impression." So, I took art in that, actually, because that's pretty much how I like to paint anyway. I like to get colour over the old painting. And I never work on one area of a painting and consider it to be finished and then move on to another. I do work on the old thing and sort of just pushing it all the time. And as you can see here, I've sort of the bit I'm painting now, I'm working on these sort of middle set of trees. I changed them quite radically a little bit later on. I'm really concerned initially of sort of loose shapes and shadows, and getting the shadows in the right place. And you will notice from the photo that I have distilled the subject quite considerably. I've stripped out a lot of things to much simplify what I'm painting. And I think that's something sometimes people forget to do. They think they need to paint everything, absolutely everything in the scene. And it's not the case. You can leave things out. You're not taking a photograph. You're allowed to leave things out and move things around somewhat. So that's exactly what I have done here. Another thing I have to say, they're very deceptive, these Impressionists. Every time I do an Impressionist painting, I'm always amazed at how much detail that they cram into their work. And that sounds like I'm contradicting myself, because I'm saying I've stripped out lots of subjects to not clutter the painting. Yes, I have. But at the same time, the elements that I do keep require a lot of detail, and close inspection of his work is almost like he's painting every single leaf and branch. He's not at all. And my initial painting of this, you'll see it when I get to it. At the point where I sign it is where I sort of think I've finished it. And then I export the image and take a close look at the two next to each other. And I realize I'm nowhere near. I've got the colors. It's got the feel of the style, but the detail wasn't in there. And I needed to go back in and rework that and put a lot more detail into that. So here you can see I'm sort of, working in, changing the colour all the time, working over the old painting. Like you can see, I'm putting shadow areas in, and then I'll move to another area of the painting. And then I notice he's got these nice sort of flecks of orange in there as well. And when I put them in, I thought, oh God, that's made such a massive difference. Just something like that, which orange is obviously complementary to green, and it totally makes it pop for me. So, that was one thing I got out of this. The other thing was that although I use, this is painted in Procreate, you probably recognize that anyway. But, when I work in Procreate, I always use the Grunge Brush, which actually I did not use in this one. I started off using 2 brushes. The next one would be the turpentine brush, and that's the one I used to get the initial colour on for the whole of the painting, and getting the first sets of colour or the blocks of colour. And then I started putting detail in using the oil brush. And after a while, it felt like the oil brush, I couldn't get it small enough to get the kind of brush stroke that I was after. So I then moved to the gouache brush, tried that for a little while, and I quite liked that and used that, but quite a bit of the painting. There we go. Look, now I'm making a sort of a radical change on those trees in the middle of the painting. I didn't like the balance. I felt it needed to come over more to the left of the painting, so I sort of changed the size of that. Anyway, getting back to the brushes. So then I used the gouache brush and used that for a little while. But once I'd done the initial painting, it occurred to me that I had to tweak the oil brush to get the brush stroke that I wanted. So at that point, I duplicated the oil brush, and I went into the settings and I tweaked it. And I can't say how I tweaked it because I didn't make any notes, but I was just not getting, the stroke that I was getting was too, there was too many bristles showing. I couldn't get like a nice thick layer of paint, but in very short strokes. So I tweaked it to, I suppose, up the level of paint, but actually make the brush smaller. And I pulled the bristles. I think there's a setting where you can change how far apart the actual brush shape is before it's reproduced. So I closed that up to get a much finer brush. Now, this is the part. No, it's not. No, I was going to say this is the part where I go in doing the final work, but it's not. I'm still sort of building it up. And at this point, I mean, it looks on the screen, it looks as though I've got lots of detail in those leaves. But, when I'd finished it, I showed it to someone and said, what do you think? And they said, well, you kind of got it, but it's not in the style of. And I thought, yeah, you know what? You're right. I'm going to have to, go back into it and rework that style a little bit further. So I quite like the effect I got with the distant trees. There was nothing in Pissarro's painting that was like that, but I wanted to, because this was, I've just taken this photo recently on a walk to a place called Elveston Castle, and it was a spring morning, so there was still lots of trees with no leaves on, and some evergreens and things where clearly in the bushes there was lots of greenery and the like. So I wanted to capture that. So I really wanted to put those loose branches in at the background and also open up the space so I could have a nice sky in it. I didn't want it all foliage. I wanted to get some sky in there. And I'm kind of, all that orange is like picking up on the hay bale. I'm sorry that you can't see the photo or the source material that I was working from here, because I didn't, for some reason it didn't record this bit of painting, so I used the Procreate export again. And here we are, here we're back into it where you can see me working on it. And this is the point where I start to refine and get in there and really get close up, and you can see how much smaller I made these brush strokes. And I started to put some branches in as well. I really started to look close at the source painting that I'm using, and then start to work on the trees. And I think it made a massive difference, actually. I really like the fact that I'm glad I took the time to go back into it and put in all this detail. And this is not a style that I paint in at all. It really is quite foreign to me, I guess. Even though it's impressionist and it's very loose, there's still a hell of a lot of detail. And I love all those little gaps where the sky comes poking through the trees. So I thought I needed to get that in. I wanted to get some more shadows under the branches, and you can just see how the form of the trees is starting to take shape by putting in all of this extra brush work. And I would, if I'd have been painting this for myself, it would have been finished by now. But because I'm doing this study, it's pushing me to work a lot harder and get more out of it. And I'm so glad I did. It really has. Well, this isn't anything like I would have done it. So I'm glad I did it. And I still think, even though, I mean, it's not a Pissarro, is it? You know, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that I've nailed it. I think this is Steve Elliott, really, but I've just used the Pissarro as a source of reference, because I can't compete with that or achieve anything that close. And again, unfortunately, I didn't capture the recording. For some reason, it didn't record it. It is a bit iffy, this recording feature on the iPad, but luckily with Procreate, you can always do an export. I've always got that switched on anyway, so I can capture the scene so you don't get to miss anything. And I'm working. You can see the difference now on the right-hand side of the painting. Look at the difference between the detail that I've got in there to the left-hand side, which I'd considered finished earlier, but I felt, no, it needs this more work. But it still looks really loose and, you know, as though there isn't hardly any detail in there at all. So, very, very clever way of painting. Much admired it. I don't think I've got anything else to say about Camille. I said quite a lot at the beginning. I'm just reading through my notes that I made. And I think I did cover it all. Later in years, though, I mean, because he did like to paint outside. Yeah, he loved to paint landscapes of French countryside, and he was an avid painter of painting outdoors. And quite often he would finish his paintings outdoors and in one sitting. And he was criticised for his style being a little bit vulgar sometimes because of that. And later on in life, he had problems with his eyes where he couldn't work outside. So he still wanted to paint the countryside. And what he did, he used to work from hotel windows. So he'd book a room with a view to what he wanted to paint and then work from that window, which seems quite sad, really. But that's about it. That is my finished painting. I hope you have enjoyed this painting in the style of Camille Pissarro, and I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please give me a thumbs up. It's much appreciated and helps me out a lot. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I have lots of videos just like this and sketching and all sorts of subjects, and I would love to be sharing them with you. So hopefully I will see you in the next one. Bye.